Welcome to Discover the Difference, a podcast brought to you by C3. I'm your host, Jamie Reed, alongside my co-host and bud, Gabriel Earl. Today on the show, we have Natalie Johnson. Natalie started her career at Google, where she was a key part of the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, or DEI program, where they made major investments in bringing a diverse group of talent to the company over time. Natalie's story is so amazing because as an agency owner of a pretty diverse organization, I thought, how much more could we really learn? And what I came to understand is that the intentionality behind a good DEI thought-focused organization is much more. It's not just a matter of having a diverse group, but it's really getting intentional about seeking people out of different backgrounds that round out your organization. I learned so much from the conversation, and Natalie's backstory of how she got to where she is absolutely incredible and just full of energy. So you're gonna love this episode with Natalie Johnson. Let's talk about it, diversity.
Yeah.
That's you're kind of the queen of it, right? How you go from being a softball player all your life, and then you transition into the professional world. What's that like, and how do you just decide to go into this diversity and inclusion, equity kind of profession?
Yeah. Well, I would say for me, it definitely wasn't a straight path, but I think there were some, common threads along the journey. So, one, when I was in college, I was a total nerd. I loved school. I loved learning. And I actually changed majors a lot when we were athletes. Just couldn't really decide. I kind of liked everything, but it was actually psychology that my junior year really got me excited. And it was interesting because when I started studying psychology, a lot of things started to improve for me. Like school-wise, I started doing better even than I was already. But also as an athlete, I started performing better than I had my entire career, and not
You're
just
applying
college
what
career.
you're learning?
Exactly. Like, for example, I learned a lot about the power of visualization, right? And if you actually think, for example, when you're at bat, don't pop it up, don't pop up this bunt. When you say that in your head, your brain actually influences your muscles and you'll be more likely to do that, to pop it up. So instead, just the power of thinking what you want to do and not what you don't want to do, right. Has a huge impact. My mental toughness just, really, really improved. And, as a result, my later years in college were my best.
That's so funny because every youth coach out there is like, don't drop your hands, don't lunge, don't this, don't that.
Right.
And inevitably, that's what they're doing.
Right.
I think I heard this analogy. It's like when you're skiing, you don't focus on the trees, you focus on the path.
Right.
That's what I'm doing wrong because I'm focused on the trees.
You focus on the trees, you're gonna hit the tree.
Exactly.
So that's cool. So what is that in that that psych in that when you just start to study, is that like how the brain works or how the brain thinks, or what was it that just kind of clicked for you?
Yeah, it's honestly everything, but I think if you were to sum up, psychology, it's just the study of the human brain. And I remember when I started studying it, my thought was always, everyone should study this. Everyone should be forced to study psychology instead of what we currently require people to do, study math, science, so many things that we never use. I think about what I learned in school every single day. And so I studied psychology. I was super excited about it. And I always knew I wanted to go to grad school. I always knew I wanted to, push myself academically even after college. So my plan was to go to graduate school. With psychology, one of the, I would say, downfalls is you usually have to get an advanced degree. So I had that on my radar. But all I wanted to do was study people. And I didn't know what that would look like. I didn't know where that could take me. And I just kind of fell into organizational psychology. And specifically, studying the experiences of people at work. I was really passionate about, how can we create an environment where people are happy and fulfilled and successful? And, the more I think about it, it had so many parallels to what got me excited about psychology in the beginning, something that an area of study, an area of focus that can kind of optimize human potential and honestly just make people happier. So that's what brought me to Google, which was my first job.
What are you studying organization-wise? Is it businesses? Is it governments? Is it teams, military? Is it all of it?
Yeah, it's a good question. Well, so studying people within organizations and kind of social dynamics and such within organizations. So that's, I would say, the scope of organizational psychology. And that, is a very simple way to put it. But typically what folks will study in this space are one kind of individual, there's some individually focused research. So like, how do you make people better? How do you help people be more engaged? How do you help folks make better decisions? And then we'll study groups as well. So when I was at Google, for example, I was a part of a team that studied team effectiveness. And so our goal was to kind of at the group level, try to understand what makes teams effective. And when we say effective, we mean the people on the team are happy, they're engaged, they're performing well. We were actually looking at performance outcomes, which was really cool. But that was more of kind of a group-based analysis versus an analysis of an individual.
What was something that, in that early research that you were doing that was just really surprising, or that you were like, wow, I didn't even, that was counterintuitive?
Well, one thing we learned is that psychological safety, so creating an environment where people feel comfortable speaking up, feel comfortable disagreeing, was one of the strongest predictors.
The status quo,
right?
Maslow's kind of infusion.
Exactly. It was actually the strongest predictor of team performance, beyond anything else. And so I do think that was surprising, although it's been over a decade since that research came out, and it's actually kind of become this, I would say, accepted, kind of well-known idea, at least in the organizations and the spheres in which I work. So I think a lot of people are paying more attention to the importance of creating a great culture, right, where people can speak up, and trying to get away from this, negative hierarchy, culture that I would say many of us probably either grew up with or had parents who grew up with that. But I do think expectations around what work is and what it should be they're changing.
Can you take that that psychological safety component and apply it to, like, when certain people act out of fear-based decision making?
Yeah.
How do you take that person and help them identify what that like safety net is, or whatever it is that releases them to where they move from fear-based decision making to one of prosperity, or whatever it is that puts them in a better psychological place?
Oh man. Well, I guess one thing to maybe reframe, like, how do you help people be less afraid?
Yeah,
I think
that's a better way of saying all that joke I just said.
Or feel more safe.
No, or feel more safe. I think removing the fear of failure is huge. And, in addition to this concept of psychological safety really taking off in the professional world, the concept of growth mindset and embracing a growth mindset is another area of study, which if you haven't read about growth mindset, it's amazing.
Yeah.
I think as parents, a lot of parents talk about growth mindset. A lot of schools have done a better job kind of embracing this idea that skills are not necessarily innate or always innate. Skills are things that you can grow and improve with effort. And so I think one thing that we try to encourage in an organizational setting is this growth mindset. And one kind of core element of having a growth mindset is learning from mistakes and being open to making mistakes, talking about them. And there's actually some really cool research that was done on rocket ship launches. And basically, I believe it was NASA actually did this big study where they were trying to predict what leads to a successful rocket launch. Side note, there are a lot of non-successful rocket launches, which I never knew. It's pretty crazy. But what was predictive of a successful launch was actually not very intuitive. It was following a epic failure is when you are most likely to have a successful launch. And the reason being is that people learn a lot more from mistakes than they do from successes. And I think that if we kind of adopt that mindset at work, I mean, the opportunities are just endless, right? If people actually can go in and not be fearful and go in, going all the way back to your question, when they have to make a decision or when they have to do something difficult, if we go in without a fear of failure, but rather kind of a growth mindset, like I'm going to do the best that I can. And even if I fail, there's something that's going to come out of it. There's something valuable I'm going to learn or we're going to learn. I really think that that can unlock human potential tremendously.
I want her to come talk to my youth sports team. Hey, I'm the worst performing team I've ever coached. And I'm like, I need you to.
So we talk about this a lot within our own organization, and we are always, preaching that idea of growth mindset, and also, we think that, failure is important. But speaking to, everybody out there is really, how do you continue to reinforce that?
How do you continue to reinforce that? You have to, I actually think, especially as a leader, and I'm a co-founder of my organization, and I have to remind myself of this all the time. I think you have to look at yourself in the mirror every day and like really, really ask, like, am I embracing this growth mindset? And I think especially when things are difficult, like when something goes wrong, there's a client escalation, you miss a really important deadline, like, am I embracing the growth mindset? Not, in the moments where it feels good and everyone's, rah, rah, but in the moments where it's challenging. I think the most important thing we can do as leaders is kind of set that example from the top. And again, it's especially critical when things are not going well.
I'm going to ask a compounded question with probably all wrong words that you can simplify for me again. But I'm curious of the role ego plays in this. And how, your study around that. And then on the flip side of that, we're also talking a lot about imposter syndrome because we're trying to push people, to understand there is an audience for you out there. And not everybody understands that. Even if the lane's really narrow, that could be a really good audience, And so we're trying to help people through it. But to get into growth mindset, you kind of got to battle with your own ego to get to that place of acceptance, right? And I think we've all dealt with it at some point in our life. So where do you see that coming into play and how it ties into achieving growth mindset?
Yeah. And I'm going to ask a follow-up question because it might help me answer better.
Turning the tables on us.
No. But have you seen an example of ego getting in the way or?
Well, anytime somebody's not willing to receive feedback, I would guess that ego's probably playing a role there. And
that's the growth. That's the opposite of growth mindset.
In a negative way, right? Ego can be a powerful, awesome, positive thing, but on the negative side of it, that's where it could play a role in not 100%. Allowing that feedback to come in, so you do grow from it. So
I think it's a great question. I just think about. And this is where I usually make the tie between my experience as an athlete and my experience as a professional in the workplace. As an athlete, you get feedback all the time, no matter if you want it or not, no matter if it's the right time or not, right? You strike out, you make an error, or you look at your stats, in the paper, it's in your face like all the time. And it's very clear, it's very obvious when you have someone who is willing to respond to feedback and willing to work hard to improve or not. It's like with sports, it's just black and white. It's like if you want to be as great as you can be, you can't have a harmful ego. You just can't. Or maybe you can, but I do believe that that's going to limit you. It's going to limit your potential. If you're not willing to, respond to negative feedback, whether it's just like feedback someone is telling you or whether it's feedback you're getting because you're not performing, right? You're getting that feedback in your environment. It's so obvious in sports. But I think sometimes in the professional world, for some reason, having that openness and that trust to be open to feedback, it really does get in the way. It can get in the way for some people. Like, I don't want to listen to feedback, or that feedback hurt me. It hurt my ego. And all of a sudden that's really detrimental, right? Someone loses confidence,
Connected to their identity.
Yeah, exactly. It kind of undermines who they think they are as a person. I think, again, it goes back to really reinforcing the value of growth mindset and helping people understand that there are so many positive things that can come from opening yourself up to feedback, to accepting that you're going to fail, to believing that, hey, if I work hard, there are things I can do to improve. And actually, the thing that got me most excited about growth mindset were examples of growth mindset in sports-related contexts. So when people are, when people believe, for example, that they are a natural in their respective sport, research finds that they actually are quicker to tap out and reach their potential and peak, right? Because all of a sudden, and you could think about, college athletes or people who keep, going up professionally. But as a kid, if you're playing sports in college, as a kid, you are always the best, right? And, I grew up in Oregon. I was one of the best in this small little state. But then all of a sudden, go play with these stars from California, from Arizona, and you are now a smaller fish in a much bigger pond. And what research finds is that if you embrace more of a fixed mindset, if you believe that all of your skills and your abilities are just innate, and I was just born with it, once you hit a challenge or start to struggle, you're more likely to quit. But if you embrace a growth mindset and you think, no, I'm here because I have the work ethic that has gotten me here. I'm here because I try hard, I work hard, I have the skills and the tactics to be successful. Then when you start to kind of hit those challenges or start to struggle, you're more likely to succeed. You're more resilient because you focus on what you did to get where you're at, and you can actually utilize those skills and utilize those strategies to move past the struggle.
Tools instead of just qualities or characteristics you're born with.
Right. Because then people think, oh, maybe I'm not as good as I thought I was. I'm going to quit. And by the way, so many people quit. And so many people think about quitting. I almost quit my freshman year because it was so hard. But then I was like, I can do this. And I worked and it took a long time. But you, again, rely on the strategies that you've learned. Not to mention, I started working on the mental toughness piece, bringing it back to psychology. That made a huge difference as well.
Can you touch on that, the mental toughness? How do you help people grow that?
Grow the mental
toughness to where they don't want to quit. Even in the workplace and sports and life. And
some of this I learned from my teammates, and I would say some of the best people I ever played with have the shortest memory. And what's interesting, and
next play,
our star pitcher, Brian McGowan, Brian Durfee now, one of our best friends, short memory. Someone can hit a home run off of her. She goes back in the dugout, comes up to bat, hits a bomb, short memory. And I actually think, and I've actually never thought about this before or put words to it, but I think it's the same at work, actually. I believe that my job's gotten harder over the years, but I think it impacts me far less because I've decided to just let things go when they happen, right? Just accept what happened, learn from it, take action, but don't dwell. And I do think that that's key to success and mental toughness, and also just having perspective. And I do think perspective is something that comes with time, but it can be accelerated, right? You don't have to be working for 40 years to have a great perspective on life or on work, but just looking back and seeing the struggles that you've had, seeing and remembering that you've overcome them, I think can really help you build that resilience. So next time, shit hits the fan at work, or you can edit that out, but next time something bad happens.
It's an adult audience.
Yeah. Next time something bad happens, you know that you can overcome it.
Yeah, it's, it feels like a lot of times, perspective and then excuses.
Yep.
Sometimes they feel like they have a relationship. And so I guess my question is like, when you go to excuses and you're rationalizing, which just seems to be human nature, and it kind of goes back to that fixed mindset and coming from a place of a victim. Mm-hmm. And we see that in our society and in the workplace and sports, everywhere we see it. How does help people move past that victim mentality?
Well, I think you can acknowledge, challenges, systemic barriers, every reality that exists that could be impacting an individual's ability to be successful. You can acknowledge those things, but then also, I think, focus on the now and what you can do kind of in that moment and in that environment. I do think that that's key.
I think
right?
maybe that connects too with going to the diversity and equality is how, as leaders and how, that we can help support, help people move from hey, I'm stuck in this place because of, the way other people are treating me to help, bring people up.
Yeah. And it's exactly. And in the work that I do, one thing we talk about a lot and one thing we work on is, how do we build an organization that is designed to promote equity? How do we build an organization that truly feels inclusive for everyone? I mean, the focus does always have to be on that. But then we also will kind of engage and intervene at other levels as well. So when it comes to, working with leaders and managers, we equip those leaders who are also big decision makers with the skills and tactics they need to make equitable decisions, to create a great culture for everyone. And then we work with individuals around then how can you, empower yourself? How can you, be as successful as possible? You need to do all of those things, I think, in order to truly create an organization that's diverse, equitable, and inclusive, and create a world where everyone truly does have opportunities to succeed.
Kind of a vulnerable discussion for us, right? As we shift into paradigm and what you do in this space, we were recognized by an industry like accolade, if you will, and so agencies from all the country tuned into this thing, and mostly the interview was all pre-scripted. We were given softball questions, we knew them, we knew how to respond to them, and all that, and then we got 3 questions from the live audience, and one of them was about our diversity. And the person's like, I looked at your website, you have the most diverse insurance brokerage I've ever seen in my life. How'd you guys do it? And I wasn't prepared for the question, right?
Yeah.
So first of all, I was like, well, where are you? And I think they were in Ohio or something. I was like, well, from a color perspective, you're probably in a place less diverse than our population. So some of it is just the population we pull from is very diverse here. So it's a reflection of that. I'm like, transparently, we don't intentionally have a diversity program. We seek to get the best candidates. And we just made our first female partner.
Nice.
But our executive team beyond partners is all women. So from Gabe and I's perspective, we think we have a lot of diversity, but individuals within the organization might not feel that way. If we're a potential customer that's going to talk to you, and we think we're on the right path, like what would you come in and say, here's how we get a baseline for it, and
here's how we grow it. Here's, because we know, and we understand all the studies. Forget about, it's important to have equality, and we believe in that as, as a core value. But we also know that diversity is really important in growth and prosperity in a business.
Yeah.
That's just known. But we want to, try to figure out how do we continue to foster that.
Yeah. Well, and not to mention the value that comes from, representing the diversity of the people, you're trying to work with and serve. One thing I would say, and what we always start with is, okay, what's the lay of the land? What's the current state? So we usually do look at representation. We look at how diverse is the organization, and not just kind of overall, but at all levels, right? So you mentioned the partner diversity, super, super important, because even if you had a pretty diverse workforce, if everyone at the top was not, let's say they're all white cis males,
old white guys,
old white guys,
which is pretty common in our industry.
It is.
I think
common.
they have it. It's like, what is it? Old, pale, and I don't know, stale. Yeah, it's like old, pale, and stale, or something like that.
Something like that.
Tracy, a partner, we're all middle-aged white guys. It is a lot of who produce in our industry, and that's why it's typically gone that way.
Yeah.
Women are playing a much more prominent role today. But the population of people who were in sales in our industry hadn't traditionally been a lot of women.
Yeah.
And people like Tracy have stepped into that space and thrived and made it to that level. But I mean, I think there's a lot we could do. So I'm curious, though, when you said you evaluated it, are you comparing what our, like, say, leadership and team looks like at levels 1, 2, and 3 compared to the population in San Diego, or what are you comparing it to?
That's a good question. So usually when we're defining, what is good, we'll just look at, diversity over, overall, certainly compared to the local population, the U.S. population, if you only operate in the U.S. But then we'll look at any discrepancies, right? And so that's by level. So that's where we'll see, okay, yeah, you have, let's say, a lot of women or women identifying employees at lower levels, but then we see this big old drop off. So we would call that out. Even if in your industry, women tend to be really underrepresented at those senior levels, we would still say, hey, that's a gap, that's a challenge. And it's something that, again, if you want to prioritize diversity, equity, and inclusion, let's talk about that as a priority area. What is it going to take to change that? And usually the levers you have to pull are many, right? So you have to acknowledge that in your industry, okay, what is it that kind of led to this pattern? Is it that right now at this level and like at this kind of area of expertise, I would say, or at this level, there might be a very limited pool of talent. So you have to acknowledge that, okay, it's going to take some time to change this. But let's look at all the other things that influence that partner level. It's internal mobility. And so we would look at things like, are you losing women at disproportionately higher rates as they move up in the organization? This is something we see in a lot of industries. So the jobs are not as, conducive to, let's say, women who have primary caregiving responsibilities, for example. Or if the role, in order to move up, requires you to move or travel a lot. And again, if that doesn't work well, we see a lot of our financial services clients doing really innovative things to make it easier to retain women and allow them to kind of move up without, needing to take on things that were historically very limiting for many women, not all women, but many women, whether it's travel, whether it's other things that made the job less inclusive. We'd also look at culture, right? So are folks deciding to leave because it's an old boys club and it feels that way and they don't feel like this is a place where they could be successful. We focus on stuff like that too. And then also just recruiting, right? So a lot of times in many industries, especially kind of older, like old school industries, network-based hiring is what, leads people to get great opportunities and grow. Not surprising, our networks tend to be pretty homogenous when it comes to race in particular. So that can also perpetuate, the same people coming in and being promoted or being kind of brought in. So really trying to push outside of that and really push our clients to go find the talent because the talent's there. You just might have to look in new and different places.
What size? Sorry,
Go ahead.
Quick one. What size organizations do you primarily work with, having come from Google? And,
All of them. So when I left Google, I was really excited about bringing diversity, equity, and inclusion work to smaller organizations. And in the early days of Paradigm, we worked with a lot of startups, a lot of companies who wanted to get this work right from the beginning. Now it's been almost 10 years. We've worked with over 1,000 organizations, and we've worked with dozens of industries. So it really does depend. But one thing I would say is, regardless of size, we do work with companies at varying stages of their DE&I maturity. Some who have no program in place or haven't done any real intentional effort around this. And then we'll work with some, huge banks or other organizations, technology firms that have been working on this for a long time, but they just want to start doing it better.
So obviously I can tell you're passionate about this topic. And you started a company to do it. What was the impetus that kind of brought you to this place? And starting Paradigm?
Yeah.
And then can you give us like a fun success story where you came in and you can give us some outcomes?
So when I I'll say I was at Google for a long time, and honestly, it was amazing. It was great, especially for, that point in my career. I was, earlier, I was right out of grad school. I learned a ton. I worked with amazing people. I still can't believe some of the people I got to work with there. I think for me, in the role that I was in, especially as a kind of internal organizational psychologist, the way I was growing was I was growing the depth of my knowledge. So I was getting really technically, skilled, growing subject matter expertise, and it was great. But I kind of realized that that was not how I wanted to continue to grow. And when I kind of was able to take a step back, I was really excited about the idea of growing kind of in terms of breadth. And I also really enjoyed kind of stepping back and thinking about how can you improve diversity, equity, and inclusion, not just in one area. Like I told you, I did research on team effectiveness and went really deep into that. But how do we step back? And at the end of the day, how can I help Google go from having 2% of their company being Black and Latina and Hispanic? How can I move that from 2% to 13% or 20%? Like, what will it take to make real kind of change? And I was excited about that. And so when we started Paradigm, that was a lot more of the focus. How do you help an entire organization do this work well? And I really like that kind of big, broad focus on strategy. And that's a big part of what I do now.
I'm curious with that. Certain industries, like I lead a transportation group, for them to have more female, and females are increasing actually quite a bit in the industry, just I think probably on their own. Yeah, trucking. But if a trucking company wanted to hire more females, they may have to like intentionally get involved like systemically at a very early where I don't know, they find an inflection point where they're grabbing people and putting them into driving schools and things like that.
Yep.
Same for us. If we identified a particular race or group that was underrepresented, we would have to figure out how to grab them at a certain point, push them into insurance licensing schools or different things like that in order to come in. Is that the kind of work you do, is help them figure out all those stages?
Exactly. We help them think about, the problem again, the problem statement being we want to be more diverse, equitable, and inclusive. Then you then have to think about the whole life cycle. Like what are all the things that contribute to your ability to bring in that diversity? And it does start at the beginning. And so we do talk to, when we help clients create a plan and a strategy, we talk to them about what's the influence you can have, at the school level. Like a lot of, for example, technology companies are investing in STEM education. They're trying to help young kids get into computer science so they have a better pool to work with. And by the way, 10 years ago when I saw Google investing in those things, I was like, wow, you're really playing the long game. But it's been 10, 15 years since I was there, and that work is paying off. Those people who are in 5th grade, 6th grade are joining the workforce now. And so it's, you're playing the long game, but it's not that long. Those efforts do pay off. Exactly what you're mentioning. Sending, women to, trucking school pays off. So we do help there. But the problem is a lot of organizations think, it's only a pipeline problem, right? That's the only thing we have to do is invest in the pipeline and everything else will work out. No, you also need to make sure that within your organization, you're creating an environment that feels good and is inclusive, right? Exactly. Yeah. People are being promoted at the same rates. You're paying people equitably. You're not, unintentionally hiring based on your networks and referrals in a way that's going to undermine your diversity efforts. All of those things matter. So we kind of think about the whole system.
Yeah, that totally makes sense.
Comes to mind when I think about, was it a state law that California changed where now when we like advertise on Indeed, right, there's transparency,
pay transparency,
some of those things. What are your thoughts about the government being involved in trying to help push that topic?
Yeah.
And were you involved in it, or do you know about it, or how'd that come about?
I know about it a lot. I was not involved in it, but most of our clients had to comply, and many of our clients operate in California. But this is also happening across many states, New York, many others. And in general, I do believe that big moves like this, pay transparency, it's based off research that shows that inequity can be partially solved by increasing transparency, right? And by having kind of more clarity and transparency around pay, you can, reduce some of these pay gaps that we know exist. It's not a silver bullet, is one thing I'll say. And we know that. So a lot of times when we work with clients, we say, yes, you need to be transparent with pay. By the way, that doesn't mean you can post a job salary range of 20K to 120K. And that's what a lot of companies were doing. We tell them that's not going to, help you achieve the results you want.
Probably does the opposite, right? It
Right.
drives distrust.
Exactly. And then,
How do you work with the challenge of, the word paradigm, right? And there's this, some people come to the table with this paradigm of they see the world, with this lens that everybody's out to push me down.
Yeah.
Whether it's, a male-female paradigm or it's something else.
Yeah.
How do you help people in general like move past that paradigm?
Well, one thing I'll say is visibility has a huge impact. So there's a really cool piece of research where these researchers had students watch videos of great leaders. Some of them watched a video of a great male leader. Some of them watched a video of an amazing woman leader. And then they were asked to do a task or an activity that actually had them evaluate male and women leaders. And what the researchers found was that these folks in the study showed less gender bias when it came to their evaluations of men and women leaders when they saw and were primed with a video of a woman leader. Meaning the more that we see kind of counter stereotypical examples of what success looks like, the better off we all are. It can really break down some of those assumptions, inherent biases that we have. And that's why when we bring it back to kind of representation at senior levels, research finds that when you have kind of diversity at the highest levels, it kind of sends this message that, hey, anyone can be successful here. And it could do a lot to, mitigate bias, but also kind of promote this sense of belonging for everyone in the organization when they can see themselves represented.
That's great. I like that.
We could go on for another 4 hours here. You're probably thinking it too. I have an idea of how that might be possible, but in essence of our time today, did Mia prep you that there's rapid fire questions?
Yes, I'm very excited.
Okay.
All right, first one. What Disney character do you most resemble and why?
Resemble
Or whether
Elsa, looks wise, and everyone thinks she's kind of gay. So Elsa.
There you go.
You're killing multiple birds.
All right.
I thought you were gonna say Ice Queen or something. Like she's stone cold on the softball field. I feel like this next question is loaded because Mia wrote these.
Okay.
And she must know the answer, and it's really embarrassing because it's
We'll
what
see.
is your pet peeve?
Ooh, my pet peeve. Not leaving dirty clothes on the floor.
Oh, my wife would echo your sentiment.
My wife will listen to this and know I'm talking about her. She's wonderful.
That fits into the book that we're reading. I think it's called the Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck.
Yeah. Yes. I need to read that book.
All right. If you could add a face to Mount Rushmore, so I guess this is like someone you look up
Yeah.
to. Who would you add there?
I think both Obamas, Michelle and Barack.
All right.
I'll leave this question by being vulnerable and saying mine. My first concert was MC Hammer, Vanilla Ice, and In Vogue.
Nice.
What was yours?
It was the Backstreet Boys.
Wayne would be all
Yeah, Wayne would be proud. He's been on a Backstreet Boy cruise.
Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't even know that was the
And he's straight. It's crazy.
That's awesome.
All right. Next one is, what is your most used emoji?
Ooh, the barf face emoji, the green face, because I think it's funny.
Love it.
This one's not as fun as the emoji one because that really got a reaction out of you. Like green face is definitely
Yes.
there for you. What's the number one quality you are attracted to in people? The energy that you get from them.
Oh, definitely. I would say kindness And that's not the same as being nice, I'll be clear, but just like authentic, just genuine kindness. People who are very clearly talking to you, thinking about you, caring about you, and not just being kind or nice for show.
Awesome.
Well, this is the part where we ask you to reflect back on your younger self. And, knowing what you know now, what kind of advice would you give to yourself?
Oh, younger. That is a great question. I mean, other than study psychology, 10 years sooner, I think I would tell myself to really relax and take your time. I think one thing when I was young, and honestly through college and grad school, I was always looking to what's next. Okay, what am I going to do after college? What am I going to do after graduate school? My first couple of years into working at Google, what am I going to do next? And it was only recently where I learned just chill, just enjoy it, learn everything you can. And I honestly think that's led me to, one, be happily married, two, have had the opportunity to work at 2 companies for very long periods of time. And through those experiences, meet amazing people, learn a ton, and just get the most out of those experiences. And I really do wish I had that mindset my whole life.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that is awesome. And I think it resonates probably with both of us. We can learn from that. So the show's called Discover the Difference. And what's your secret sauce? What has made you unique and special, successful? In your college career, obviously had to be successful to get there, to be a high achiever at Google, to start Paradigm and be successful. Your wife, your relationship.
Yeah. Gosh, that's a good question. I think I would say, I think I have a pretty good balance of being really confident, but also pretty self-aware. I was actually on a panel the other day. It was an entrepreneurship panel where the question was, what kind of led you to be successful? And I think especially with starting Paradigm, for example, I knew my strengths. Like I know what I can do, and I knew at the time. But I also knew what I didn't know, and I knew what I wasn't good at. And I didn't start Paradigm by myself. I started Paradigm with 2 amazing women, and we all really round each other out perfectly. I think that was also the case in college. My teammates, my class in particular, I think we had the same vibe. We all had our strengths, and then we all leaned on each other for other things. And at the end of the day, I think that makes any group and any person more successful when you know yourself and you're confident, but also, again, going back to growth mindset, open and honest about where you can grow, because then you're going to grow in those areas.
So is that the aware, you can't change a world you can't see,
Exactly.
the awareness?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, that's a good one. Well, so for the closing here, normally we just say, hey, if people want to reach out to you, where can they find you? And maybe you can end with that, but maybe it's just like a little bit of an elevator pitch kind of thing, if you on Paradigm, because I think a lot of people are going to be interested in it, and then how they can reach out to you.
Yeah, for sure. So, Paradigm, we're a diversity, equity, and inclusion consulting firm. Everything we do is focused on helping organizations do better when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we do this work because we believe that if organizations do this work better, it's ultimately going to contribute to a better world. If people want to learn more, I'm always happy to connect. You can find me on LinkedIn, Natalie Sue Johnson, or just reach out. The Paradigm website is paradigmiq.com. Folks can find me or just reach out, but would love to chat.
Awesome. Great conversation.
Yeah.
Like I said, we could have gone forever. Sitting here talking about this. So thanks so much for coming on and sharing with us.
Thank you. It was very cool.
When did you come up with the name Paradigm?
Paradigm shift. Just really trying to shift, the world and how it works. And our ultimate goal is to work with every single organization in the world. It's, an ambitious one, but we feel like if we do that, things will be very, very different and much better.
That's awesome.
Quality work.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for all you do.
Thank you. It's super cool. Thanks for doing this.